let's kick it off. Welcome to 2025 SampleCon. We have Michael McCrary. The next big shift, what 25 years of insights evolution tells us about the future.
How's everybody doing? All right, how's everybody doing? All right, great. 2012 was the first SampleCon in the Ritz-Carlton, and it is incredible to see what it's become. Major kudos to the board and to Rachel for what they've built. This is truly spectacular. I see so many faces around this room that I've worked with for a long time. I want to start with a quick exercise. Can everybody raise their hand right now and hold it up in the air? Okay, thank you. So if you have worked in this industry since 2020, right, leave it up. If not, take it down. All right, 2015, take it down, all right. 2010, 2005, 2000. All right, I got in this industry, there you go, 1907, that's right. I got in this industry in 2003, and this industry has always been about innovation. And if you think about it, the first thing that we really did is we moved from offline to online. That was huge. Everything was telephone, everything was in person, everything was actual physical mail, right? So moving to online was a major innovation, and we lived in that world for quite some time. I saw a guy in the room. Where's Doug Guyan? If he's in here. There he is. So everything was an email to a survey, right? That's all it was. And I remember when our projects would, come up against the wall, I'd have to go down to Doug's office, like, can you send more emails? Can you add more reminders? Can you add more incentive? And that's all it was. You sold your panel, and that was the way you got it done. It was sophisticated but unsophisticated. And it was a one-to-one relationship. And it was like that from probably 2000 until probably 2005, right? Just to give a quick history of innovation here. And that was the first time that we introduced the concept of a router. Now keep in mind, these are not a lot of companies existed at this time. You had a Greenfield, you had an SSI, you had eRewards. None of those names exist today. A lot of those roll up into a Dynata or a Taluna. There's others that I'm leaving out, but this concept of routing made it really not just one-to-one. Like we basically had it where our employees in operations could put all of the survey inventory on there, and we didn't have to just send one email to one survey, and it optimized that experience. Tons of conversation with the buyers around, is this representative? What sort of biases are going to exist? But it was a massive leap forward in conversion and click to completion, and it was a major breakthrough. And then the next phase is what we would call the river, right? So again, you still had this handful of companies that built technology to optimize delivery, but then they essentially subcontracted out to other companies and websites to deliver their panel or their members into that stream that could also fill that inventory. And keep in mind, we're still in the phase where every project that ever got sold was set up by somebody that worked at that company, right? A lot of rigor around don't mess up our panel, we don't want to do these bad things, right? So then we have this seismic shift, and it was actually probably started a little earlier. Actually, Cent was probably the first exchange company. And this seismic shift is when we moved into this concept of a DIY, right? And that seismic shift also brought in transparency, right? Because if you go back to that river phase, we would never tell you where we were sourcing in our river. It was like a secret. And it turns out a lot of those companies were actually really good at creating respondents. They just didn't have direct sales channels, right? So now we moved into this shift. Why is it a seismic shift? The seismic shift is that instead of the employees at the companies that cared about their panel, we moved into a phase where other people were able to put survey inventory on platforms, right? And I think this is an important distinction which has actually led us to some of the issues that we all talk about right now because it went from very much curated and cared for guardrails to anybody could put information on to buy. The next phase, and we're talking now probably, it's a long ways from there. Like we get to like 2013, 14, and then you get APIs, right? So it was only a handful of companies, maybe 5 to 10 at this point, that controlled where everything went, right? Project sold, on platform, river, router, aggregated, delivered. Then we move into, okay, other people are setting this up, and then it goes to API, right? API is the phase where the suppliers that we're sending into these routers are no longer letting the brand name companies make all the decisions. Like inventory's exposed, and they're starting to yield manage. And I can remember the companies that were doing this. This was P2 Sample, which is now part of Synth. This was Protege, which at the time was called Swagbucks. You had the beginnings of Blue Media, which is now Disco. And they had to figure this out, and it was massively disruptive because you had transparency, you had all this other inventory being set up, and the decisions are now being made by the suppliers. Right? Big shift. It's also, I believe, a time when the sophistication of those suppliers is still pretty nascent. Right? They're getting better yield management, but it's still not perfect. And then you have all this inventory, which I think led to a pretty bad phase, which is massive rebrokering, right? You have a lot of companies who get on these platforms and make claims that they have 5 million panelists around the world, and they're putting inventory on these systems, and they're now manually arbitraging by buying, and with very little care about what happens. A click is a click, conversion to it doesn't matter. There's no penalty to it, right? So that's gets us to where we are today. And where we are today is, in some ways, not terribly different from that 2015 phase where you have API delivery. But over the past 3 years, I would say, the technical sophistication in our supply chain ecosystems has dramatically increased. Okay? They are not coming from places like Sago. They're not descendants of e-rewards. They're not greenfield mafia. These are not people that grew up in our industry around sampling methodology. They're coming from performance marketing. They're coming from financial trade systems, right? And they're all about speed, and they're all about yield management, and they're all about lifetime value of members, and they're all about winning the war for getting more members, right? There's actually a war that's starting to be created with these suppliers on who can get the most members and who can out advertise each other, right? It is becoming very, very competitive in that space, more so than I've ever seen it. And because of that sophistication and that shift of sophistication, we are seeing, I think, more power go to the supply chain than I've ever seen, because it's not a 27-year-old Michael McCrary running down to Doug Guyan's office saying, send more sample, need more invites, add incentives to it, do whatever we have to do to get this job done. They don't care, right? They are ingesting 10, 15,000 different offers across our system and other systems, and the only thing that matters is yield, EPC, earnings per minute, and they're not beholden to anything except performance, which is, I think, a good thing, right? I think it's good that in our modern era of people can put any inventory they want on any system, and a lot of it can be priced at any price you want to price it, that something is bumping up against that and saying you will not get delivery if you perform this way. So I think this is a really good part. What the bad part is that, and because this is a room of transparency, prices have gone down way too much. I wish we had inflation in this industry. We don't. And thank you. It would be, you have to think for a second, right? if the companies that are the underpinnings of our supply chain were not involved in our industry within the last 5 years, and they came from other industries, what do you think they're going to do if prices continue to degrade? They're smart. They'll find other ways to make money. They'll go sell their web traffic to do other things, right? So that we are right at it where if it doesn't correct, there will be no interest in selling in our industry because they're eking it out, right? Second thing, there's a lot of talk about quality and fraud, right? And I'm here to defend the supply chain, right? Because we are a conduit between the buyers and suppliers in our company. How are they supposed to do the investments to really meet the standards when CPIs are sometimes 20 cents, 40 cents, 50, average CPI is under $2? Like, how? I just think it's unrealistic. And I think we're missing the point here that the prices have come down. Everybody's putting inventory on, and they don't care much about the waste. Oh, my conversion goes down. Okay, that cost me an extra 5 cents. Like, it matters, right? And if you're worried about the future, right, then you have to be thinking holistically, like, well, where's the investment going to come from, right? How are these fixes going to happen? So we've gotten to this point now where the strike zone of performance is defined, right? Now, we look at a lot of inventory and a lot of supply inventory, and we start looking at, like, what happens when prices go too low? So there is a line in SAM when we look at what's offered to suppliers because we allow price setting on our platform. And I don't know the exact number, so I'll make one up. We'll say it's 50 cents, right? If it goes beneath that, 30% of the PSIDs in our system, some people probably know what that is, they won't engage. It doesn't matter from which website. 30%, it's gone. Right? So if you care about the quality of your research, because we're already dealing with, are you willing to take a survey online for an incentive? You can lop off 30% of people that don't care. They're not going to do it. And then at 15 minutes, you get to a point where a different group of 20%, they're not going to do it over 15 minutes. What's 30 plus 20? It's half of the available strike zone is gone when you're outside those parameters. So I think we've all said we want shorter surveys, we want this. It's going to happen to you. Right? Because I don't know if that's going to change, but those things are happening, and it's because the sophisticated suppliers they just won't send to it. Got smaller. So big shifts, right? So process and tech. So from a technology perspective, I think the allowance of people setting all these prices and plumbing the bottom, it's going to have a place, but I think the future is going to be more about sophistication on what's the right way to do this. I promised I would not make any marketing claims about what we do, but us and others are making real investments on helping buyers, the big ecosystem of buyers, stop putting the prices in. Let us tell you what a good offer will be. And I think that's going to happen more, right? Because the buyers like to get their jobs done. Some of them like to day trade. They want to figure out how much but now once we start to talk about the strike zone, if you're going to miss out on 30% here and you're not going to do this, right? So I think tech is going to play a big part. And then process, right? And some people in this room know about this, but others don't. But about a year ago, we looked at our inventory and we have different categories of customers ranging from brands all the way down to what we call a rebroker, right? And a rebroker is a very low value add buyer on our system, often selling to our competitors, putting their offers on our system. And, we had to dig into this. And what we did, which I think can be a big process for our future, is we actually rolled out click fees. So click fees, essentially we said if your buying behavior over the course of a month, if your conversion is less than 20%, we're going to charge you 2 cents per click. And nobody liked it, but they all, again, agreed to it because we said if you don't, then you can't buy on our system. We got to a point where we fired buyers. If you didn't want to do it, then fine. In the first month after that was put in place, there were 1 million less clicks on our system, right? And then when it's tranche 2, another 500,000 clicks went off, and we're about to roll out tranche 3. So I think this belongs in our industry, right? We're still going to buy and sell on CPIs. I don't think it's going to go to everything's on a click basis. But if there are not financial implications for putting on via API, via UI, to make people actually care about their inventory, I think it's a bad thing. I think we need to prioritize having the inventory better. So those are kind of the big thoughts, right? The future. I promised I wouldn't talk about anybody else's topics, especially around AI, so that kind of limited all the cool stuff I could talk about. But that's what I'm saying. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll be back up here for the panel soon.